So what happens when a young Marine goes to war, expecting to be hailed as a hero, but instead finds a reality that shatters everything he believes in? Well, that's the story of W.D. Erhard, and how Vietnam turned him from a patriot into a dissident.
You know, when Erhard first landed in Vietnam, his head was just filled with these old black and white newsreels from World War II. He had this vivid picture of American GIs rolling through French villages, being showered with flowers and wine and kisses. He genuinely thought he was there to be a liberator, and he was ready for that hero's welcome.
But the reality he found? It couldn't have been more different. Driving from the airbase in Da Nang, there were no cheering crowds, no flowers, nothing. The local people on the streets, they barely even glanced at him. As he put it, it was like he was invisible. That whole liberator fantasy just slammed right into the cold, hard wall of reality. He wasn't a hero. He was an intruder.
Now that initial feeling of confusion, that sense of being completely out of place, well, it didn't last long. It was about to be replaced by something much, much darker. In fact, his entire worldview was going to be completely demolished within his first 72 hours in the country. The moment that changed everything kicked off with what sounded like a pretty routine assignment. It was his third day, just 3 days in, and he and his corporal were told to go to an amphibious tractor park to help process some civilian detainees. Now, these are people getting held for questioning, mind you, not enemy soldiers. What he saw next, it was just pure brutality. 2 tall vehicles roll up, and the Marines on top, they just start throwing the Vietnamese civilians off, just hurling them 8 or 9 feet to the hard-packed ground below. And these weren't soldiers, they were old men, women, and even children. All of them tied up, hand and foot, with absolutely no way to break their fall. Erhard was, of course, horrified. He turns to his corporal, asking, "What is going on? We're supposed to be helping these people." But the corporal's response was a gut punch. It was this chilling warning that basically served as his real welcome to the war. It was a clear message. Forget the rules you thought you knew. They don't apply here.
And that horrible incident was really just the beginning. It was the start of a slow, dawning, and absolutely terrifying realization for Erhard. He was beginning to see the twisted logic at the very heart of this war. How the U.S. military's own actions were creating its enemies.
And this really gives you a sense of the sheer frustration of it all. His battalion was getting hit about 75 times every single month from mines and snipers, constant attacks. But get this, in his first 8 months, Erhard personally saw only four armed enemy soldiers. It was like they were fighting ghosts, and that frustration was just boiling over.
So, what do you do when you can't see the enemy? Well, the response was often just brute force. A patrol gets sniped at from a village, so they call in an airstrike on that village. And you can see how this creates a vicious cycle, right? The airstrike destroys homes, rice paddies, families. The survivors, who have now lost everything, are filled with anger and grief. They now have every single reason in the world to join the Viet Cong. The American forces were literally manufacturing their own enemies.
And this was the moment it all clicked for him. This was the huge turning point. He finally understood. He wasn't a liberator. He was part of a destructive force that was terrorizing the population. He realized that, of course, they didn't welcome him. He was giving them, in his own words, every reason to hate me.
On top of all this horror, there was this other layer of just complete absurdity. It was like there were 2 different wars going on at the same time. The brutal, chaotic war he was actually fighting, and the completely different war he was reading about in the military's own newspapers.
For instance, after his unit found a big cache of Viet Cong weapons, he saw this headline in the Stars and Stripes newspaper. It was a huge declaration of victory, claiming they'd set the enemy back by at least 4 months. Sounds pretty good, right? A real moment of official optimism.
Yeah, well, apparently nobody bothered to tell the Viet Cong. Because in just the 10 days after that so-called major victory, a bridge just a stone's throw from their compound was blown up. An Amtrak vehicle hit a massive 50-pound mine, killing several men. A patrol was ambushed. The war just kept on going, completely indifferent to what the newspapers were reporting.
So, when you're faced with a reality that's not only brutal but also makes 0 sense, what do? For Erhard, his mind just kind of flipped a switch to pure survival mode. He completely stopped trying to understand the why of it all. The questions were just too big, too ugly. His mission was no longer about winning a war. It was about making it home alive. And his entire world just narrowed down to this one thing: the Freedom Bird. That was the nickname for the plane that would take you home when your tour was up. For him, that was it. That was the whole goal. March 5th,
1968. Forget the purpose of the war. His only purpose was to stay alive until that specific date.
He had this incredibly powerful metaphor to explain this mental shutdown. He said asking why was like banging on a locked door. And behind that door, it's pitch black. And all you can hear are these loud, awful noises, like wild animals thrashing around. It's just terrifying and unknowable. And that's the choice, isn't it? Do you really want to open that door and step into that horrifying room? Do you want to face whatever's in there? For him, the answer was no. It was far easier, far safer to just pull that door shut and turn your back on it.
And here's another way he put it that makes so much sense. He felt like he was playing a card game, but he'd only been dealt half a deck. He could see the cards in his hand, the daily chaos, the firefights, but he was missing all the other cards, the ones about politics and history that would let him understand the rules of the game. And really, when you're playing with an incomplete hand, why even bother trying to figure it out?
And then, just as suddenly as it all started, it was over. His departure from Vietnam was every bit as chaotic and surreal as his time there, and his return home, well, that turned out to be anything but simple.
I mean, you can't make this up. He got his orders to go home in the middle of a firefight. He literally stripped off his gear, handed it to his buddies who were still fighting, jumped into a Jeep under covering fire, and 10 minutes later he was in a helicopter 3,000 feet up, looking down at the battle he had just been a part of. The whiplash from that transition is just unimaginable.
But coming home wasn't some storybook ending. Sure, he was ecstatic to be alive, but he was also terrified and totally lost. His first sight of America was the Oakland Bay Bridge, completely swallowed by what he called impenetrable fog. Talk about a fitting metaphor for his future. And to make it all worse, the girl who had become his entire reason for surviving, she'd sent him a Dear John letter months before. The anchor he had been clinging to was just gone.
And so, Earhart's story leaves us with this central, haunting question that goes way beyond Vietnam. It really speaks to the nature of war itself. When a soldier realizes that his own side's actions are creating the very enemy he's supposed to defeat, what is he even fighting for anymore? What's left to fight for, besides just surviving long enough to catch that freedom bird home?